everyone, I'm Dina with Mills Family Gardening. In this video, I'm going to try to attempt to grow a melon in a container. I've never grown melons in containers before. I've grown them in raised beds or in the ground, but this is the first time that I'm going to experiment with containers. Melons require a long, warm growing season, and we have plenty of that here in North Texas, Zone 8A. This is how I started my melon seeds. We already have some sprouted seedlings that turned to plants. But I just wanted to show you how it all started from the very beginning. I filled up this container with organic moist potting soil, and then I made a hole about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch deep, and I put about 4 to 5 seeds in the hole and then covered them up. And I kept all these containers with melon seeds under a grow light because back in March it was still too cold for melons to be planted outside. So I wanted to give them a head start so that in April I could plant seedlings instead of seeds, and that way they will start producing sooner. I kept the soil moist, and after about a month, this is what we have here. These seedlings are about 1 month old, and that's what I'm going to use to plant in this container. And this container is filled up with the soil from last year. I think I grew a tomato plant in here, but this is organic potting soil. And since the soil is depleted, I'm going to add some worm castings, or they're literally called worm poop. If you have organic all-purpose granular fertilizer, you can use that. I'm going to add a handful or a couple of handfuls to this potting soil and then mix it with the soil, and these worm castings will feed the plant long term. But since worm castings are not going to be enough to feed the plant throughout the growing season, I'm going to fertilize the plant on a weekly or bi-weekly basis with liquid fish and more bloom. Liquid fish has a lot of nitrogen, and more bloom has high numbers for phosphorus and potassium. So combined, that would make perfect liquid all-purpose fertilizer. I'm going to make the soil moist before I plant the seedlings into the soil. So I'm going to try to grow Kajari melon for the first time. I saw it in a seed catalog and I really liked the look of it, and I thought I had to try to grow it, and hopefully we'll harvest it in a few months. So these are the roots of this Kajari melon, and I'm going to make a hole about the size of this root ball in the container. I can actually make the hole deeper because when the stems are buried in the ground, they will eventually grow roots all along the stems wherever the soil touches them. So I'm going to make the hole deeper just so that the seedlings also would not break, because the seedlings of melons and cucumbers tend to be very delicate, and one wrong movement can break off the seedling. So for that reason, I want to try to plant it deeper. And I'm going to keep them in here like that. I'm not going to thin them out for now. But in about a couple of weeks, I'll come back and thin out the weakest seedling, and then I'll keep 2 seedlings in the container. Melons require a lot of space to grow because they spread a lot. So I need to find that space, or I could put them by a trellis, and that way they will be growing up vertically. Today is May 18th, and our melons have grown. I have 2 plants in this container, and they have started blooming. Today I noticed the very first female blossom on our melon. You can see that a female blossom is sitting on a tiny little melon. You can see a little swollen area underneath the flower. The male flower does not have any swollen over it, sitting straight on a stem underneath the yellow blossom. And here are the 2 flowers together just to compare them. To help keep the container moist, I put these 2 composting pots in the container, and we made a separate video on how we compost in flower pots. I just put kitchen scraps, old compost, some cow manure on top, and then what I do, I water these containers, and then all the water or compost tea at that point flows down through the drainage holes and waters the melons. And you can see that where the composting flower pot was sitting, the melon roots started gravitating to all the moisture, and they're trying to grow into the composting container. And that's okay. For the female flower to turn into the fruit itself, bees need to pollinate it with the pollen from the male flower. flower. That's the job of bees. If you don't have bees in your area, then most likely the female flower will not be pollinated and will not grow into a melon. There is a way to hand pollinate melon flowers if there is not any bees in your area, and there are plenty of videos on YouTube about that. Today is May 26th, and I would like to give a quick update on our melon. It's doing well, and I did hand pollinate those flowers, and if you come closer, you'll see that we have a little melon growing right here. So all that hand pollination did work, and we actually have another little melon growing right here. I hope that it will grow into a melon. Our weather is warming up. Today is supposed to be 98 degrees Fahrenheit, and the melon still stays in full sun because melons need full sun to produce a lot of flowers and grow large fruit. And since it's getting much warmer now, I water this container at least once a day, sometimes twice a day if I'm in the garden doing other work. If you don't want to keep these pots in the larger pot because they don't necessarily look neat, you can simply mulch your container with any kind of mulch that you have, as long as that mulch does not have any artificial dye or perfumes in it. And since the plant has started growing fruit and producing more female flowers that will turn into fruit, I make sure to fertilize this container at least once a week and sometimes even twice a week with liquid fish fertilizer and more bloom. Today is June 9th and our melon is actually growing. You can see that it's gotten larger in size. It has not increased in size in the last few days, so I'm thinking it will stay this size until it ripens. And to protect the fruit from roly-polies and other insects that like to chew the fruit from the bottom when it sits on the ground, I put it on something. It can be this plastic box, or it can be something else that you have on hand, like a piece of wood, just to raise it from the ground so that insects would not get to it from the bottom. But besides insects, there's other critters that would happily eat this melon once it starts ripening. I'm going to use the screen that people usually use to make screen doors or windows. It's metal, so it will protect our melon pretty well from critters. Some critters get really desperate when they're hungry and they can chew even through this metal netting. For that reason, you can use a double layer to make it more secure. So I cut the size of the screen that I need for the size of the melon. Actually, it's a little bigger because I used it for last year's melons and watermelons. But you can use any size that you need for your fruit. I also use a stapler to staple all the sides so that there wouldn't be any holes. So the three sides are stapled and only one side is open. So I'm going to slip this melon inside of this little metal bag, and I'm going to use the stapler to staple this one side to make sure that it's covered completely and no critter or animal would be able to get inside. It's also better to make a bag like that while the melon is still green, because the more ripe it's becoming, then there's a better chance that the melon would fall off the vine. So as soon as you notice that your melon stopped growing but it's still green, you can put it inside of this metal bag. Also, make sure to staple the places that come close to the vine where the melon is growing, because the critters really can use any opportunity to get to your melons. Today is June 19th and our Kajari melon is ready. It actually separated from the stem already, but it's still in the screen bag, so that's good. None of the animals tried to get close to it. So we're going to try to harvest it. For that, I'm simply going to open the bag, separate like that, or you can take a special tool that would remove the staples, and here it is. You can see it already separated from the stem. That's where it used to be connected to. So let's cut it open and see what it looks like inside. This is our first time growing Kajari melon. It sure is pretty on the outside, and this is what it looks like on the inside. It looks very tasty. You see a lot of seeds. So I'm going to get the seeds out, and actually we can save seeds at this point. I can simply rinse them in a bowl and then spread them on a plate in a single layer, let them dry out, and then when they're completely dry, I can store them in a little plastic bag or a little paper envelope, whatever you have, and then I can plant them again either this season or next year. So I'll cut a piece and we'll find out what it tastes like. All right, here we go, guys. It's really good. It's very juicy, sweet, full of flavor. I would say the flavor is something between a cantaloupe and honeydew melon. Actually, it's really good flavor. So I really like Kajari melon. This was our first time growing it this year, and I really like it, and I think I will grow it next year again. But we do have a lot of melons that are planted in the ground. Our melon plants in the ground certainly have more blooms than our plant in the container. I think that's because they're getting more moisture from the ground, because the ground stays moist more consistently than the container. But if you live in a small space and you don't have an in-ground bed, then growing melons in a container is a really good way to grow them. This was a good experience. I really hope you try to grow melons in containers. And thank you so much for watching this video, and have a great day.